The most expensive books and manuscripts in history.
In 1978, one of only 48 copies of the Gutenberg Bible, the first large printed book, was sold to a library in Germany for over $2 million, making history as the first book or manuscript to sell for over $1 million. Today, however, that sale doesn't even make the top 20. Here are the most expensive books and manuscripts in history.
Number 1. United States Declaration of Independence. Worth $8.14 million.
Only 25 copies of the first printing of the Declaration of Independence, sometimes known as the Dunlap broadside, are known to exist, and one of them sold to a consortium of private buyers for $8.14 million in 2000. Remarkably, this copy was discovered as the backing of a framed painting sold at a flea market in 1989.
Number 2. 15th century Quran manuscript. Worth $8.76 million.
In June 2020, a 15th century manuscript of the Quran, the Islamic holy book, was sold at auction for £7 million, which is equivalent to $8.76 million. The manuscript is notable because it was written on colorful gold-flecked Chinese paper, and the price almost doubled the previous record for a Quran sold at auction.
Number 3. The Olympic Manifesto. Worth $8.8 million.
French aristocrat Pierre Coubertin wrote the Olympic Manifesto in 1892, calling for a modern incarnation of the Olympic Games 4 years before the first modern games in Athens, Greece. In 2019, it was purchased at auction for $8.8 million by Russian billionaire Alisher Usmanov and subsequently donated to the Olympic Museum in Lausanne, Switzerland.
Number 4. Yola Encyclopedia. Worth $9.21 million.
The original Yongle Encyclopedia, commissioned in the early 15th century during the Ming Dynasty, consisted of 11,095 volumes, making it the largest general encyclopedia in history until Wikipedia came along. A mere 2 volumes, produced a century later for the Jiajing Emperor, sold for 8.13 million euros, which is equivalent to $9.21 million in 2020.
Number 5. Babylonian Talmud. Worth $9.32 million.
Daniel Bomberg first printed a complete edition of the Babylonian Talmud in 1520, and only 14 of those sets are still known to exist. In 2015, one of those copies was purchased at auction by Leon Black, a wealthy New York businessman, for $9.3 million, making it the most expensive piece of Jewish literature ever purchased.
Number 6. Acts of Congress. Worth $9.83 million.
In 2012, the Mount Vernon Ladies Association of the Union, a nonprofit that operates George Washington's Mount Vernon estate as a museum, purchased Washington's personal copy of the American Constitution and Bill of Rights for $9.83 million, which was a record for any American historical document at the time.
Number 7. Mr. William Shakespeare's Comedies, Histories and Tragedies. Worth $9.97 million.
Commonly known as the First Folio, an original copy of the collected works of William Shakespeare from 1623 sold at auction to a private collector in 2020 for $9.97 million. There are only 6 known, complete copies of the First Folio in the world, and this copy is now the most expensive work of printed literature ever sold at auction.
Number 8. Waldseemüller map, worth 10 million US dollars.
German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller's 1507 map of the world is notable for being the first such map to use the name America, named for explorer Amerigo Vespucci, for the continents now known as North and South America. The map was purchased from the German government in 2001 by the Library of Congress for $10 million.
Number 9. The Birds of America, Hesketh copy, worth $11.5 million.
Only 119 copies of the Birds of America exist today, and it is a major event whenever a copy goes on auction. In 2010, Sotheby's sold a copy of the book, which was published in the mid-19th century and contains hundreds of hand-colored prints by James John Audubon, for £7.3 million, which is equivalent to $11.5 million. The copy had once been owned by Lord Frederick Hesketh, a British collector.
Number 10. Gospels of Henry the Lion, worth $11.8 million.
In 1983, an almost perfectly preserved manuscript of the Gospels dating from the 12th century was purchased by the West German government and an assortment of private banks for £8.14 million, which is equivalent to $11.8 million. Which was the most expensive work of art sold at auction at that point in time.
Number 11. Illustrated folio from the Shahnameh of Shah Tahmasp, worth $12.15 million.
The Shahnameh Book of Kings is an epic poem about the mythical history of the Persian kingdom. In 2011, the illustrated folio of a version of the Shahnameh commissioned by Shah Tahmasp in the 16th century was sold for £7.4 million, which is equivalent to $12.15 million, a record for a piece of Islamic art.
Number 12. Rothschild Prayer Book, worth $13.6 million US.
The Rothschild Prayer Book is an illustrated manuscript of prayers, dating from the early 16th century and named after the wealthy Rothschild family, who owned the manuscript for several generations before it was confiscated by the Nazis in 1938. In 2014, Australian businessman Kerry Stokes purchased it at auction for $13.6 million.
Number 13. Bay Psalm Book, worth $14.2 million US.
In 2013, philanthropist David Rubenstein purchased one of 11 known copies of the Bay Psalm Book, the first known printed book in the United States, for $14.2 million. Dating from 1640, where it was published in Cambridge, Massachusetts, this small book of Psalms for Puritan churchgoers is the most expensive printed book in history.
Number 14. St. Cuthbert Gospel, worth $14.34 million.
This Cuthbert Gospel is the oldest intact book in Europe. Buried with St. Cuthbert in the late 7th century, it was found in the saint's coffin over 400 years later at Durham Cathedral. Purchased by the British Library for £9 million, which is equivalent to $14.34 million in 2012, the Gospel is now on display, both in person and online.
Number 15. New Book of Tang, worth $17.25 million.
Translated as Pronunciation and Abstract of the New Book of Tang from Shibi Jingsh. This commissioned history of the Tang dynasty, itself dating from the Song dynasty, sold for a remarkable 110.4 million yuan, which is equivalent to $17.25 million at auction in 2018.
Number 16. Sherborne Missile, worth $21.21 million.
In 2001, the British government arranged a deal with the Duke of Northumberland to purchase the Sherborne Missile, a spectacularly illustrated manuscript dating from the early 15th century and considered a masterpiece of English art. To prevent the Duke from selling it abroad to cover £9.4 million in note inheritance tax, the government waived the tax, while the Heritage Lottery Fund and the British Library sourced an additional £5.6 million for the manuscript, coming to a total of £15 million, which is equivalent to $21.21 million. Crisis averted.
Number 17. Magna Carta, worth $21.32 million.
In 2007, one of only 17 known copies of the Magna Carta, the basis for democratic constitutions throughout history, was sold at auction for $21.3 million. This particular copy was created in 1297, when Edward I enacted the Magna Carta as law, 82 years after King John signed the original document at the behest of rebel barons.
Number 18. Codex Leicester, $30.8 million.
Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft and once the wealthiest man on the planet, purchased Da Vinci's Codex Leicester at auction for $30.8 million in 1994, making it the most expensive book purchase to that date. In 2018, Gates digitized the pages of the Codex for a traveling exhibition, which allows people to browse the manuscript through a kiosk called the Codescope.
Number 19. Letter from Zhang Gong to his friend, worth $31.73 million.
A 124-character letter written by 11th century scholar, writer, and government official Zhang Gong sold at auction in 2016 to Chinese movie mogul Wang Zhongjun, a known collector of art and historical artifacts, for 207 million yuan, which is equivalent to $31.73 million. The value of the letter nearly doubled since its last sale in 2009 for 109 million yuan.
Number 20. Book of Mormon, worth $35 million.
In 2017, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, better known as the Mormon Church, purchased a printer's manuscript of the Book of Mormon, the earliest surviving copy of the sacred text published by Mormon Church founder Joseph Smith in 1830, for $35 million from the Community of Christ, another church based on the teachings of Joseph Smith.